welcome everybody. Glad you could be here. Let me go ahead and just switch over for a moment here so that you guys can take a look at our presentation. And as Sean mentioned, this is going to be a first look at Windows Server 2012. I know originally we were calling this first look at Windows Server 8 because that's what it was called during beta. So if there's any confusion there, I'll just make that real clear that Windows Server 8 was nothing more than a beta name, and it is now called Windows Server 2012 or 2012, whichever way you prefer to say it. So to go ahead and get started, I'll take, I promise, no more than just a few seconds of your time here. For those of you who have not seen any of my courses or have not been in any of my previous webinars, I just want to introduce myself. My name is Ed Lieberman. Who am I? I'm just a guy who loves computers, and I've been working in some technology-related field for over 20 years now. But most importantly, I've been certified in instructing IT professionals for more than 13 of those 20 years. I have a bunch of alphabet soup, but who cares about that? That's just what you do when you're an instructor. One thing I always like to tell everybody, and it has nothing to do with technology, but just to give you an idea of the kind of guy I am, in my spare time, I like to volunteer and help out struggling grade school children with math, so I tutor them. And I don't do this for money. I do this for friends, family, neighbors, etc., because that's who I am. I am somebody who gets pleasure in life when I can help somebody who is struggling in a certain area to finally have that light bulb go off and finally get it. And because I have this, I was born with this natural knack for math, and I've learned how to teach. I figure I'll put that together and I can do some good. But that's the same thing that I hope to accomplish in these webinars and with my courses as well. And then, of course, who am I professionally? I am TrainSignal's lead Windows Server instructor. Great. So now that you know who I am, I would like to know a little bit about you. Now, there's nothing you can click on right now. This is just a slide that you're looking at. In just a moment, I'm going to bring up a poll that I want you to answer. It doesn't tell me a whole lot about you, but I am curious. You know, with each of these webinars, I'm always curious what parts of the world people are here from. So let me go ahead and open up this poll, and it should be changing right now. All right, it should be up on your screen. So please go ahead and just let me know what continent you're from, and I will emphasize continent. You know, I guess I'm kind of stuck mentioning this every single webinar because the first one that I did, I put Australia, and I think I had a follow-up email, or maybe it was in the Q&A. Somebody from New Zealand was offended that it was Australia. I'm referring to continents here. So also, for those of you who are maybe here from South America, Africa, or Antarctica, I don't mean to bunch you all together other than the fact that I'm limited to only 5 choices. All right, so I see that a good many of you have already voted. So I'll give you just another moment here, and then I'm going to close the poll, and we'll take a look at the results. All right, so we'll close this, and let's share the results. And what it looks like is almost 3/4 of you are here from North America, which is where I'm at. I'm here in the United States. But it's good to see that we do have a sampling from all around the world. And I will tell you, I think this is the first webinar I've done that last choice, South America, Africa, and Antarctica, it has 6%. So that's great to see people, or I guess I can't really see you, not to freak you out. I had someone tell me I freak them out when I tell them I can see them. But to go ahead and speak to all of you from all around the world. Now, another quick question that I do want to ask you. Let me go ahead and hide that. And we're going to jump into another poll here. This poll is asking, what is the latest version of Windows Server that you've worked with? So this is technology related, and I want to know who's my audience. And I assume many of you have worked with multiple versions of Server, but I've given you all the choices ranging from working with Windows Server 2008. And please, again, I only have 5 slots to fill here. So if you've worked with Windows Server 2008 R2 and you're thinking that's like a whole nother operating system than just 2008, that's okay. Just still gives me the basic idea. And of course, if you've never worked with Server and you're just getting into the business and you're learning about things right here, right from the get-go with Windows Server 2012, that's awesome. Just go ahead and let me know that. So again, looks like while I was talking to you that the mass majority of you have already voted. I'm going to give you just another moment here for anyone who has not voted. You were waiting for me to give you the go-ahead. Please go ahead and click your vote. And then I'm going to close this poll, and we'll take a look at the results. All right, so let's close this, and let's take a look at the results. And it looks like wow, almost 90% of you have worked with Windows Server 2008. Okay, and what I'm going to tell you is, and we're going to get into this in just a moment, I'm going to show you something which you're going to almost maybe want to roll your eyes at and think, well, all right, I know how to do this because I did it in Windows Server 2008. And I will tell you that there are going to be a lot of similarities, but the point behind some of what we're going to do here is to show you where there are things that are similar and you already know how to do them. And that's a good thing, by the way. It's a good thing when you know already how to do some of the stuff in a new operating system. You don't want to have to, be just like everyone else that has no experience and have to start fresh. So that's a good thing. But I'm also going to show you where some things are different. And in some cases, they are subtle differences. And in other cases, there are extreme differences. So we'll take a look at that. Looks like a small group of you have experience in Windows Server 2003, but then you skipped 2008. Nobody ended on Windows 2000. That's very interesting. Not a surprise, though, because if you touched Windows 2000, there's a good chance you touched at least 2003 or 2008. And then you have NT4. You'll notice I didn't even go further back than that. I'm going to guess of the 1% who said NT4, maybe there's even someone in the room who would have answered NT351 or something further back. And then I see we have 4% of the people have just never worked with Windows Server. And again, welcome. And I'm glad you're getting you're getting on board with Microsoft and network operating systems at this point. And I'm actually just realizing that I don't think it ever shared with you. So here, now you can see it. Okay, great. Sorry, I didn't click a button there. So that's what I was looking at. If you were wondering, hey, what's he talking about? All these percentages. All right, let me go ahead and hide that, and let's go ahead and get back over into our presentation. All right, what are we going to do today? Well, when it comes to something like a brand new network operating system, especially when we're talking about the server side, I mean, an hour, let's be real. What are we going to accomplish in an hour? I mean, when I put together courses for these operating systems, each course tends to be what, 15, 20 hours, and then there's how many courses? I mean, if I take Windows Server 2008 as an example, I have 5 very specific courses, and if I add up all the hours for all 5, I mean, we're talking what, 40, 50, 60 hours. What can I show you in an hour? Not only that, but the other thing I want you to know is that this is very new. This is still in beta. Now, technically, we're in release candidate. Okay, this was just put out there. Release candidate 1 was just released, so we've moved from beta to release candidate, but it's still considered part of the beta process. All right, so please understand that this is still new and things are changing at all times. So something that you learn right now might change by the time it goes to RTM, which stands for Release to Market. Okay, so just always keep that in mind. You just want to get the general idea. So we're going to do 2 things. Getting started with Windows Server 2012, I'm going to show you literally, if you get your hands on a Windows Server 2012 DVD and you put it in, I'm going to show you, and we're going to do a very fast version. I'm going to show you what it looks like to install it right from the very first moment you touch it. And then we will move through that. I'll even show you how to turn it into a domain controller. Okay, and again, this is going to be a very fast version. And so that's kind of the getting started part. And I want to, again, remind you, especially since we have a very large number of you who are experienced with Windows Server 2008, you're going to see a lot of screens that look very familiar. But I'm also going to do my best to point out to you places where maybe there are some differences, and I want you to also watch for things that are different, whether it just be the screen colors being different or the position of where you select something being different, and so on and so forth. So watch for those things because I think that that's important. Then once we're done going through that, we're going to take a look at the new look that Microsoft is focusing on with this operating system. It's called the Metro style, and not everybody is a fan. Matter of fact, I will tell you, quite frankly, if I'm just being honest, I'm not a fan. Now, I'm not an enemy of it either. Okay, I'm not sold one way or the other. I am working with it, and I am learning what's good and what's not good. I'm also learning that when I think that I found something that's not good, that, well, it's not as bad as I thought. Maybe I just didn't realize there was another way to do something I was trying to do, and that Metro is actually very cool. So whichever side of the fence you're on right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how you can hopefully get a little bit more used to using this Metro style. Now, one last point of business before we get into this. I just want to mention, Sean mentioned about the Q&A, right? So I'm here. That's why you come to a live webinar, so that I can answer these questions for you. Feel free to throw your questions up there, but please keep in mind that this is a brand new product. I am not a developer for Microsoft. I'm not a program manager at Microsoft, okay? I am an instructor who works for TrainSignal. What that means is, yes, I spend my time trying to learn things, but it takes time, and I don't automatically know every aspect of this operating system. So I want you to feel comfortable that you can ask anything you want to ask, but just understand that there's a very good chance that I'm not going to have the answer today, but what I plan on doing, for anybody who asks a question, I'm going to go ahead and follow up with you with an email. All right? So that said, let's get started. All right, so like I said, especially for those of you who are used to Windows Server 2008, this is going to look a little bit familiar. Now, this is all just screenshots. I'm not going to actually waste your time because it would take a lot longer to go through and do an actual installation. When you put it in, you get a very familiar screen where we see about selecting language and time and currency format and keyboard and input method. Typically, you just go ahead and click Next, or I shouldn't say typically. Here in the United States, you would click Next. Everywhere else, you would change it to whatever you want and then click Next. Moving on, here's that same screen that we had in Windows Server 2008 where we can either install now, or you'll notice there's also, and I don't have a highlight here, but down in the lower left-hand corner, this is also where you would go into the different recovery and restore modes, and you can repair your computer. None of this is new. This is identical other than it's a darker blue that they're using. Matter of fact, I don't even think they use blue in Windows Server 2008. Now we get to choose which operating system we want to install. Now, right now, because we are in release candidate, the only choices available, or really it's choice available, is Data Center Edition. Within that edition, we have two choices. We have Server Core, or we have Server with a GUI. Okay, so we have the choice between Core or full installation, just like we had before. One thing that you should know, though, is that once you select one version, in other words, if you select that you want to be full server with GUI, and then you decide that you want this to be a stripped-down Server Core edition, which, by the way, for those of you that don't know what that means, Server Core means that you'll only have a text window, basically. You don't have the GUI. And it's more secure, and it's also stripped down from a lot of extra services that don't need to be running. Well, you can switch after the fact, which is not something that you could do before. So we're going to go ahead and select the full GUI version for this demonstration. And go ahead and click Next. From there, you get your typical license agreement where you have to accept the license terms and click on Next. Here you get to choose if it's an upgrade or a custom installation. And again, so far there's really nothing that new here. This is exactly how it looked for the last few versions. You can upgrade if you were upgrading from a previous version, or in the case of right now, this is a clean installation, so we're going to say custom, where we're just installing Windows right from scratch. Takes us into our drive screen that we've seen before, and what I have here is just, this is a virtual machine that I did this on, and it's just a simple 200 gig hard drive, nothing fancy because we're not really doing anything with this machine. And you could just go ahead and you could click Drive Options if you wanted to partition this or do anything fun with that. But I'm going to go ahead and just click Next to install on that 200 gig hard drive. And we get into our screen here that if we were doing a real installation, we would sit here and stare at this for a while, right? Depending on the speed of your machine, you would stare at this for, 10 minutes or so, 15 maybe. We copy files and get them ready for installation, install certain features and updates, and there'd be some reboots involved. But when that's all done, this is the screen that you get. That is the very next screen that you're going to get, where it's going to have the username of administrator, and you're going to go ahead and type in whatever password you want to assign to that administrator. And then you click Finish. It will go ahead and complete the process. Again, there are reboots involved, but when everything is all said and done, this is what the login screen now looks like. And again, this might change. By the time we get to RTM, by the time this is actually released out there, this might not have the identical look, but this is what it has. And you'll notice, by the way, if you look, you can see I captured this screen yesterday morning, right? It has nice and big. You can't miss it. It's done at 9:35 on Wednesday, June 6th. That was yesterday. So we go ahead and you press Control-Alt-Delete. You get a nice little login window. Put in your password, log in, and by default, the first thing that's going to open up is the new Server Manager. And this is what it looks like. Now, there are three main areas to this new Server Manager, at least here on the dashboard. Okay, so you have your left pane where you can choose between this dashboard view, your local server, so this individual machine that we're on right now, we can look at that. We can look at all servers, which I'm going to talk about that in just a moment, and we can go right into files and storage services. Now, that's one of the main points of this new Server Manager. Because everything is quickly moving to the direction of being all about cloud computing, what Microsoft has done here is they've made it that you can go to the Server Manager on pretty much any computer in your network, and that computer has to either be running Windows Server 2012 or it has to have the remote server administration tools from Windows Server 2012, and you will get this Server Manager, and everything you do, whether you're at the local computer or whether you're at some remote computer, is going to look exactly the same. That's the idea, is that you can sit down anywhere and manage any server the exact same way. So you'll notice that there is a Welcome to Server Manager section. Okay, I guess I could use my arrow here. I don't know if you guys can see it. But up in the top here where it says Configure this local server, okay, where you can add roles and features, which we're going to look at that, and we're going to do that in just a moment. You can add other servers to manage. Okay, so again, you can say, all right, well, I've got these other 40 servers in my network, and I want to manage them all from right here. And then you can also create what's called server groups. And that's what we're going to get down here in the bottom section. Now, again, this is a picture, so I can't actually do this scroll bar. We're going to get into the actual operating system real soon here. So down here, we have roles. So specific roles will show up, and server groups will show up. Again, there's more below this that you can't see right now. And this is what it looks like. And you'll notice, by the way, that this is red, which kind of stands out like, oh, that must be like an error or something. And it is. This little 1 that you see next to manageability, that's an actual error. And we're going to talk about that error because this is something that's being talked about a bunch over this last week or so since Release Candidate was put out, that when you do a clean installation, you start off with errors, and that's bothering a lot of people. Now, if I were to click down onto local server, okay, so I moved from the dashboard down to the local server, this is where you can now see things similar to what we saw in Windows Server 2008's Server Manager. This is more specifically, this is like the initial configuration tool, if you're familiar with that, where you can go through and just step by step set things like your computer name and if you're going to be part of a domain and firewall, remote management. But I want you to notice that things are kind of cut off over here. We can't see a whole lot. And that's another point that I want you to understand, is that this operating system was built based upon widescreen resolutions. Okay, since everything is now going to, everything's HD and everything's going to widescreen resolution, it's very, you don't see really any 4:3 screens being sold anymore. Now it's all widescreen. So if you change it to a widescreen resolution, it makes it a little bit easier to look at. And you don't have to. I mean, the scroll bars are still there. You can get to everything. It just takes a little bit more work. Now, on this particular machine, I just want to tell you, here are a couple things that I did. And I did very little. Okay, I did as little as possible just to show you that you can actually what you can accomplish in a very little amount of time. All I did was modify the computer name. I gave myself an IP address, and I set my time zone. Okay, because if I go back, you'll notice that it had a random computer name. It originally had IPv4 and IPv6 turned on to get their IP addresses dynamically, which is not something that you want to do on a server, especially something that's going to become a domain controller. Okay, and then you'll notice the time zone says Pacific time zone, and I'm in Chicago. So I went ahead and I changed those 3 items. Now you might also notice that for the IP address, it no longer says anything about IPv6. Again, well, not again, but I should tell you, Windows Server 2012, as we've seen with each version of Windows Server, since IPv6 was created, has more and more support and more features involving IPv6, and that's a whole different arena that we'll get into, I'm sure, in other webinars and or other courses and lessons and stuff that I'll do. But for today, I didn't want us to be distracted by that, so I went ahead and just brought it back down to the old school IPv4. All right, so we bring ourselves back to the dashboard. Coming back to the dashboard, what we're going to do now is we're going to turn this into a domain controller. We're going to add roles and features. Okay, so clicking on that, you get into the Add Roles and Features wizard. This is going to look similar to Windows Server 2008. This is nothing more than a before you begin screen, which you always get, so just warn you that, hey, this is a server and you're about to install an important role or feature, so you probably want to make sure that you have a good password on your administrator account, make sure you have things like a static IP address, and you have the most, the most up-to-date security settings and updates. So, typically what I do is I'll a lot of times check the box that says skip this page by default. Okay, I'll just go ahead and check that box, and then that way I don't, it's like I know this. I don't need to see it every time I go to add another role or feature into this particular computer. Then I just go ahead and click on Next. And this is something that is new to Windows Server 2012. And this is something that is still somewhat, at least from my experience, is still kind of being worked on because I've seen a few different versions of this already. There were 3 here. It's now moved down to 2. I have a feeling the 3rd, in some capacity, is going to come back. But for right now, the top selection, okay, the one that just says role-based or feature-based installation, is the one that is similar to what we're used to, where it's literally just this server, right? Just configure a single server by adding a role service or a feature to it. But then we also have remote desktop services installation, which is specifically, again, everything is becoming cloud-based, right? If you want to go ahead and have support for VDI, virtual desktop infrastructure, and create virtual machine-based or session-based desktop deployments. So we're going to go ahead and select role-based, because we're just doing this one server here, and click Next. Now we need to, and again, remember, it's, you can go to any server manager and manage any server. So it's kind of asking me here, well, what server do you want to go ahead and install a role on? Now in this case, we only have the one server that I put in place, so it doesn't really matter what I pick here. Select a server from the pool, and there's just one there. So go ahead and select that and click Next. And I will tell you before I move on, again, if we had more servers in the pool, if we had this enterprise environment and there were 40, 50 servers in the pool, I could choose which one I want to do this from right here, right from wherever I'm sitting. Then from here, I get to install what role it is I want to install. Now this is something that's going to be, is something I thought was very cool in Windows Server 2008, and it's still here in Windows Server 2012. And I really want to emphasize that because sometimes when you've been doing this as long as I have, it gets very frustrating when you find a certain component to be very cool, and then for whatever reason they get rid of it. So in this case, I'm really glad that it's still here, and that is that when you check the box for Active Directory Domain Services, okay, when we check this box, a little pop-out window jumps out at you and says, there are certain other features that are required as part of installing Active Directory Domain Services. So you can choose if you want to have Windows automatically install these, it's telling you, all right, you're going to do group policy management, and you're going to do some RSAT, right, the remote server administration tools. So, all right, I'll go ahead and I'll say, yeah, add those features. Here's what I think is so cool about it. In previous operating systems, it would recommend or it would suggest, but it wouldn't just do it for you. Or it might say, hey, you need these, so I will go no further until you add these manually. What I liked is that now it says, hey, you need these, and you can click one button, and you say, yeah, then you know what, go ahead and add them. And the best part of this, that I always personally found, the best part about it is that I essentially, and maybe you guys have different experiences, but in my experience, I have found it basically never steers you wrong. Okay, I've never been steered wrong. It just plain and simple works. If you say, these are the features you're telling me I need, great, let's add them. So if we come back here, go ahead and click on Next. Here is where it shows you some of these features that it's going to automatically check those boxes for you. Okay, so you can see group policy management is already checked. If this was a live operating system, I would scroll down and show you the RSAT tools as well. Go ahead and click Next. So this is just basically giving you the opportunity to add more features if you want. But it already checked the boxes for you that you need to have. Then from here, it just explains what ADDS is to make sure you are definitely installing the right thing. Click Next. You get a confirmation screen. On the confirmation screen, it tells you what it's going to do, but you also have, and this is new, there's an option for this box here to restart the destination server automatically if required. And the reason is because, again, you may not be on the server. You may not be on the literal server that you're trying to do this for. So they're asking you, now, when you do this, if there's a restart, are you sure you want to make that other machine just reboot, or is it maybe in the middle of doing other services you don't want to kill? When you check that box, because it's all about a reboot, it says, all right, are you sure? And you're going to say, yep, I'm sure. And then go ahead and click Install. From there, it goes through the feature installation. I do want to point out that it tells you can close this wizard. Things will keep moving. Okay, again, remember, you may not even be doing it to this individual computer. It's some other computer possibly. So you don't have to have this window open. This window is just by choice if you want to see the progress. Once it is complete, this is what it looks like. Again, similar to Windows Server 2008. Similar to Windows 2008, you had to install the binaries for ADDS first, but then from there, you need to promote this server to a domain controller. In other words, the DC promo aspect is done afterwards. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that link. It then takes me into the Active Directory Domain Services Configuration Wizard. And here is something that Microsoft really wants me to point out. Okay, so for those of you who have experience with Windows Server 2008, if you're at all bored at this point and thinking, I haven't learned anything, this is one very specific point, and it's a subtle one, but Microsoft wants this emphasized because you will find a lot of these throughout the operating system. And that is, they determined that in an enterprise environment, right? So you've got, all these different offices, domains, whatever. How often are you actually asking to create a new forest? Typically, once, right? A lot of large enterprises are just a single forest, or maybe you have a second or third forest, but that's it. That's only 2 or 3 times you're going to ask for a new forest. Whereas, how many times are you installing Active Directory and you're saying, I need to add another domain controller into my existing domain? That's like probably 90% of the domain controllers you're installing is another domain controller in the domain. So whereas this wizard in the past always defaulted to creating a new forest, to make life easier, they said, you know what? Let's go ahead and add a new domain controller to an existing domain is the default, because that's what you do most often. So that is one thing they really want you to know, because you will find things like this throughout the operating environment. And more specifically, when it comes to Active Directory, I actually met with one of the program managers who helped get this all put together, Active Directory, direct domain services in Windows Server 2012, and he shared, this kind of specific stuff with me. But in this case, we do want to create a new forest, right? Because this is the first domain controller, and I'm going to name it webinar.local. Click Next. From here, things are very similar in the sense that you're going to go ahead and select the functional level. And I'll tell you what, I know there's a lot of questions coming through, but I know there was one that was asked very early before we got started about, if there's a new functional level. And the answer is yes, there is a new functional level for Windows Server 2012. But of course, you can also set these to older functional levels if you need to be backward compatible to old domain controllers. You need to determine if you're going to be a DNS server as well, which is a good idea. Determine if you're going to be a global catalog server, which you'll notice is grayed out with the check box checked because you have to be if you're the first domain controller. And then you could determine if you want to be a read-only domain controller, which you'll notice is grayed out, and it's not checked because you can't be a read-only domain controller until you already have a fully running non-read-only domain controller. That's not new. We saw that in Windows Server 2008. Of course, you got to put in your DSRM password and click Next. Now, this is a screen that is the same but different. The screen, the message that it's telling you is the same, but it looks different. You get this little warning that comes up saying that you have this delegation for a DNS server cannot be created. What that means is I'm creating webinar.local. It can't find a parent DNS server for the .local domain. We know that. It doesn't exist. If I wanted to read the whole message, I could either click on Show More, or you'll notice that I'm hovering the cursor over it, and it reads the whole, almost the whole message anyway. The whole message was there. When I took a screenshot, I cut it off. So we know that this is an okay problem, so we'll click Next. It brings up the NetBIOS name, which is going to default to just webinar because I did webinar.local. Okay. Click Next. Where do you want to put your database and log files? I'm going to move through this very quickly now because this is all just standard basic stuff we've had for years. Click Next. Here's where you can review everything that you've just selected that you want to do, and this is now into something that is new, and you will find throughout the entire operating system, and that is View Script. Everything in Windows Server 2012 is PowerShell based. So what you have the opportunity to do here is if you click on View Script, it's going to come up and show you this is the PowerShell script for this exact deployment of Active Directory domain services on this computer. Why is this important? Because if you want to go ahead and do this in PowerShell and maybe script this for some other computers, well, you go ahead and take a copy of this file or maybe save this file and then copy it and modify, things like domain name or computer name, things like that, and start doing mass deployments. That's something that's very cool, and again, you're going to find throughout Windows Server 2012. Go ahead and click Next. Here's where you now get a prerequisite check, and I want to point out that up at the top it says that all prerequisites have passed successfully, and at the bottom in the View Results window it shows that. Now I also want to mention that you'll notice that there are some yellow warning icons there, and actually if we scroll up the window there are 2 of them. They are just that. They are warnings. It doesn't mean you can't install. It just means that there's potential problems. The fact of the matter is, as long as you have that green checkbox that says all prerequisites are met, you can click Install. So if we click Install, it's going to go through, and during the installation, guess what? You're going to most likely see those same warning boxes all over again. Okay, so here's a warning, and it has to do with cryptography algorithms compatible for NT4. Okay, and I'm not going to go into the details of this warning, and actually a little further on when it's doing DNS, it's going to come up with that same warning we saw a while back about the delegation for the DNS server. Okay, so we're not going to worry about these. I'm just letting you know that this is the kind of screen, this is the kind of verbose environment that you're going to get while installing. And then when all is said and done, when it gets to the very end of this installation, this is what your screen will look like as a whole. It's going to, if you're on the, and this is because I'm on the local computer. If you were on a remote computer and you were sitting and you were looking at the monitor, this would suddenly come up on the screen. You don't have to do anything about it. It's just saying, you know what? We just installed ADDS, so you're about to be signed off, and the machine's going to reboot. And then you wait a few moments. I think it's about 15 seconds, and boom, the computer, it shuts down and it reboots. And what I want to do at this point is I want to take us into the actual operating system. Okay, so let me just move a couple of quick things here. And let me switch what I'm showing you over to this. I'll give it a minute to pop up on your screens. I can see it tells me that it's working on switching over there. For some of you are seeing it. All right, there you go. Now most of you are seeing it. Now you should all be seeing it. All right. So what you should be looking at now is this is not a PowerPoint presentation anymore. Okay, this is the actual Windows Server 2012. Okay, this is a virtual machine that I'm running with Windows Server 2012. And the very first thing I want to show you in here is, again, we have these red boxes here. Let me scroll down. Okay, you'll see that it breaks this down into different roles and server groups, and in all of them, we've got this error under manageability. Now, I wasn't originally planning on showing you this error because, well, this is something that just happened just as a release candidate. In beta, this didn't happen. But as long as it's there, you should know what you're dealing with. I'm going to click on it, and it tells me that it cannot get the BPA results. That's Best Practices Analyzer. And let me go ahead and cancel that because I had to actually look up what the deal was with this. And what I found from different articles I read and contacts at Microsoft is that this is a known issue. You will most likely not see this once you get into RTM. But just in case you do, and or in case you start playing with this with Release Candidate, let's go ahead and show you how to fix that. I'm going to jump over to the local server, and I'm going to scroll down here, and here you have the Best Practices Analyzer. And all I have to do is go to Tasks and say Start my BPA scan. Now this is going to take just a moment to go through, and what this does, this is something that Microsoft actually started a long time ago. I mean, I think the first Best Practices Analyzer came out maybe a decade ago at this point, maybe longer. And the idea is Microsoft has some best practices on the way you should be setting up your system to keep it running smoothly and securely. And, you know, originally it wasn't that good. Originally they would make some suggestions and you would just constantly look at these suggestions. You know, that doesn't fit with my environment. Now, I will tell you that the Best Practices Analyzer is a pretty good thing. And every version they've made has gotten better and better. And it's a great way to allow Microsoft to compare the way your system is set up against a database of what they think. And by the way, that database is always changing. Okay, it's constantly changing as far as based upon feedback from different companies and things like that, so that it can tell you where you might want to change things. Now, here's what I'm going to tell you. While this thing is running, because I don't know exactly how long this will take, it went pretty quickly for me when I did it the other day, but I don't want to have us sitting here just waiting on it. Let me go ahead and jump back to the dashboard while it's running. What I will tell you is when it's done, and this might even happen while we're talking, actually I can already see it happening, is manageability is going to no longer be red. It's not going to have the error, but the Best Practices Analyzer results will have an error, or at least an indicator. Now first of all, let me hit refresh here. And I want to see if manageability would go. There it goes. See how manageability is starting to go away? Here, manageability, it's now green, but we still have these errors on our Best Practices Analyzer results. So let's go look at those results. You'll see here there's a whole lot of warnings, and then we have a few errors. What you need to do is you need to go through and address these. Now, as far as the warnings, typically they're just that, and you're not going to necessarily have those error messages staring you in the face. But the errors you really need to address. So here it talks about how one DNS server on the list of forwarders must respond to DNS queries. So if we were to go into DNS and look at why that is, we would find out, oh, okay. In this case, I believe what we would find out is there are no DNS servers on the forwarder list, and that's why we're getting the error. So what you can do is you can just simply right-click. If you know what the problem is, and maybe you say, look, I know what it is, I'll resolve it later, or it doesn't affect me, you can tell it to exclude that result. Okay? And you'll notice that a whole ton of warnings and other errors disappeared along with it. And that's because they were all related. Whereas here, let's see here, DNS servers on the Ethernet should include loopback address, but not as the first entry. Now, it's interesting that this pops up because this is something that happens automatically as part of installing Active Directory and DNS services together. So I didn't do that. It did it. But anyway, we know that that's what that is, and you pop into DNS. So let's exclude that result. All right, and that goes away. And what should hopefully happen now, there you go. Go back to the dashboard. I don't have those red boxes staring at me. It's kind of intimidating when you see those red boxes staring at you. So those are gone. Now, one more thing I want to show you, and then I'm going to jump over and see what we have in our in the Q&A queue, and see what I might be able to answer. But anyway, before we get to that, there's one more thing I want to show you, and I will tell you this is based off of an article that I read a month or so ago. It was an article that was actually written not for Windows Server 8 at the time, or even Windows Server 2012, which is what we're on here, but it was actually written for Windows 8, the client version of this operating system. And not everything in that article pertains to Windows Server, but I thought the concept of the article was a really good idea. And I know I've done it on every Windows Server 2012 machine I'm working with. And what that is basically, you'll notice there's no start button down here on my taskbar. So what I have to do is hit the actual start button, or the Windows button on my keyboard. And when I do, this is what you get. This is part of this whole Metro look. I mean, there's a lot of aspects that make up the Metro look or Metro style. But for most people, they look at this and say, I don't know. I mean, I know me personally. I looked at it and I'm like, this doesn't help me. I don't like this. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you basically how to turn this into this. Okay? This is what the start menu looks like on another Windows server. Actually, believe it or not, this is actually Server 8 Beta. If I get out of the start menu, go back to the desktop, you'll notice this is actually Server 8 Beta. That's why the color is also a little bit different here. But notice that this start menu is just a little bit easier to understand. It's not just an absolute spattering of icons all over the place. It's organized, and I've also added a couple things to it. So let's jump back over here to our Windows Server 2012 computer, where things are kind of real ugly. And the first thing we would want to do is get rid of maybe some of the stuff that I don't want to see there. I don't access on a regular basis. Okay, so don't take what I'm doing literally. I'm just going to take some examples here. Let's say Server Manager, yes. PowerShell, no. What I did was I hit the right mouse button. All right, I hit the cursor over, hit the right mouse button. You get a checkbox. And we'll come over here, and we'll say InfoPath, no. Yes, yes. We'll do no. That's PowerShell. Don't need it. ADSI edit. I'm just going to kind of go through a bunch of them here. Control panel, domains and trusts, users, clip organizer. Again, there's no real specific. I'm just kind of randomly going through each one, deciding, and we'll say no to these. We'll say yes to those. Boom, yes, no. Okay, so now that those are all checked, what I did was I checked the boxes of the ones that I don't want. And all I have to do is come down here where it says unpin from start. Click on that. Look at that. I've already cleaned up my start menu just a little bit. Now, if I wanted to add something, let's say there was something I wanted to add that wasn't here. Well, then what I could do is I could, and I'm going to show you a faster way well, there's a couple different ways to do this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and add additional programs to the start menu by right-clicking. There's a few different ways you can do this, but I'm going to right-click where I get this option for all apps. When I do that, I literally get all apps that are on this computer. So maybe if I want something like the command prompt, I'm going to right-click on it. And again, I can right-click multiple things. Okay, so if I wanted the command prompt, and we'll say Paint, or we'll say Notepad. Oh, apparently you can't do multiples here. So we'll say command prompt. I can right here say pin to start. When I do that, and then I click out of this, I actually hit escape, and then hit the start menu. Either way, you'll notice the command prompt is now there. Another thing that we could do is, besides applications, if I go into my computer here, we'll go into my C drive. Let's go ahead and add a new folder here, and we'll say important docs. I could right-click on that, pin to start. Go ahead and open up our start menu. Look at that. Now I have a folder for important docs. So it's almost like creating a shortcut. All right, so that's the next thing that we can do here. Now what we can do is we can organize these a little bit. So maybe we want to take our Office program. So we're going to take, let's say, Word, and I'm just going to literally click and drag, and it moves it over into a separate section. And actually, it was already kind of divided into two sections. So let's actually put Word there, and we're going to put Excel here, and PowerPoint, and Outlook. All right, we'll go ahead and group those together like that. Oh, we'll add Internet Explorer down here. Why not? Matter of fact, let's take something like Internet Explorer, and let's right-click on it. And we're going to not just have it on Start menu, but we're going to pin it to the taskbar. So I click on that. You'll notice that when I leave the Start menu, now I have Internet Explorer pinned down here. All right, so we'll go back to the Start menu. And I'll tell you what, I want Desktop to be over here by itself. So I have these three different groups. And looks like we're pretty well set. Got our three different groups here. I can't think of, I'm trying to think, I guess computer, maybe I'll move this guy over here. We'll say he's part of that section. You know, again, I'm just kind of making this up as I go along because on any given computer, I'm going to want to decide how do I want this to look. Once I have made my groups, right, once I've actually done this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom out. Now I can do this by either holding down the Control key on the keyboard and using my scroll ball, or my, the scroll ball on the mouse, or I could literally click on this little minus down here, and that would do it as well. From there, I could right-click on one of these groups, and I could name it. So maybe I'll call this one Applications. Oops, sorry, name the group. I typed it in, but I forgot to click a button. Applications, and then click Name. There we go. And I could click on this one, and I name the group Tools. Name it. Go ahead and click anywhere, and it zooms back out again. And look at that. Now I've broken this down not only into different groups, but I've named the groups so that I understand what I'm looking at. All right, so we're starting to get there. We're starting to look kind of the same as like what I had before on that other machine. Now what I want to do is, one complaint that a lot of people have is that there's no real quick and easy way to shut down the computer, right? Or even log off, right? I mean, I have to click on Administrator, and then this is where I can sign. I can log off. It's called Sign Out now, or lock it. Or if I come down here and don't click on the minus, just put my cursor on the minus, and then come up here to Settings. This is where I have my power button, and this is where I can choose to turn it off or reboot the computer. Well, I'll tell you what. I want to actually give myself an easy way to do this. So let's go ahead and get out of our Start menu, and let's minimize our Server Manager. Oh, look at that. Apparently BPA is upset with me again. All right, so just kind of, I like showing you that because this is all kind of real time. It'll tell you when something has changed. But I'm going to minimize our Server Manager so we can look at our desktop. I'm going to right-click on the desktop and create a new shortcut. And for this shortcut, I'm going to put in the shutdown command. Shutdown. And for an actual shutdown, you do /S, and I'm going to do a time of 5 seconds. Okay, so it's shutdown /S/T, space, and then 5. Next, we'll actually call this shutdown. I'll capitalize the S. I don't know why. I like it that way. And click Finish. Now I have shutdown. Now I'm going to right-click on this because this icon's kind of goofy for a shutdown. So I'm going to right-click, Properties, Change Icon. This is just a message about it, so click OK. And I like this button. This is like a power button, right? So click OK, and OK. And now I have a shutdown shortcut. I'm going to create another shortcut, and I'm going to do the shutdown command almost the exact same way, but I'm going to do -R-T and a 5. And again, that's to reboot or restart. Next, restart. That's what we're going to name it. Finish. Again, I don't even know why I moved that shutdown one. I'm going to leave that over here. I'll show you why. I'm going to go to the Properties, Icon, OK, and power button. There you go. So now we have shutdown and restart. I'm going to right click on it and say pin to start. I'm going to right click on it and say pin to start. Now that I've pinned it to start, I will go ahead and highlight them and delete them, make them go away. When I go back to my start menu, hey, look at that, shut down and restart. Drag them over here, don't need to have them in a section of their own. Look at that. That, to me, is something that is usable. Okay, I mean that is very usable to me, and that is where the Metro style thing is really supposed to be the way of the future. Is, you know, it's supposed to really give you the stuff that you use and put it right out there front and center. Now, one other, well, actually, there's a couple other quick things that I want to show you here, and that is one drastic thing that kind of affects people when it comes to this start menu and the desktop is that, you know, it's such a drastic difference, meaning the look of this versus the look of this. It's very different. It's that. So what I like to do is, let's go back to the start menu. I'm going to zoom all the way to make everything small. I'm going to hit print screen on my keyboard here. Okay, so I just hit print screen. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into just a picture editor like Paint. Okay, nice and simple. And you'll notice Paint isn't here, so how do I get to it? Well, I could right-click and do All Apps. We saw that already, right? Or I could actually get this. A lot of people said, hey, where'd the search box go? Wasn't that kind of the really awesome thing they added? You just click Start and start typing what you want. Well, look at this. I'm on the Start menu, and I'm just going to start typing on the keyboard. P-A-I-N-T. And it jumps right into a search box for applications, and there is Paint. That's pretty cool. I actually was ticked off about that at first because well, where's my search box? Matter of fact, I will tell you that I thought from there, let me go ahead and get out of all of this. I thought from there that I was going to have to hover my cursor and go to search and type Paint. And I was like, I cannot believe you have to do all that. Well, I didn't. I just didn't know that it's built in. Just start typing, and there it is. So I'm going to open up Paint. Once I'm in Paint, I'm going to hit Control-V for paste, and it's going to paste in that picture. Let me go ahead and maximize this out. That picture that we had of the Start menu. Then I'm going to go ahead and select just kind of a big open dark blue box here, and I'm going to hit Control-C for copy, and I'll hit Control-V for paste, and I'm going to cover up all my applications there, paste it again, cover up the word administrator, and now the word start, I'm going to change the word start. I'm going to tell it to do a text box, and I'm going to put in, oh wait, before I type anything, I want to change this, and let's see if I can find this quickly here. We want to go to, I believe it's this guy right here. I don't even know how you pronounce that. Sego UI Lite. I'm going to change this to, let me actually type it in, 44. Now, this took a little doing. Matter of fact, I'll be honest, I cheated. Somebody else wrote an article, and I saw that if you use this font, and then let's make it white, and type in desktop, you'll notice that it looks very similar to the way Start looks. All right, go to Select, select this, put it over there. Oh, I need to actually, let's see here, I'll just do a paste. Yeah, cover that up again. You see the point I'm getting at here? I'm creating this picture, and what happens when you have a picture? I'm going to go ahead and save it as a ping. I can put it anywhere I want, so let's just go ahead and, I probably should put it in my pictures location. Call this desktop background. Save it. Close it. Now, let's go ahead and go into, oh, sorry, Files. Why is it not cooperating with me? Well, I'll go the long way in the name of saving time here. Let's go into our Start menu. I'm going to go into my computer, go into Pictures. I'm going to right-click on Desktop Background and say Set as Desktop Background. And watch what has happened. This is what my desktop looks like. This is what my start menu looks like. Desktop, start menu. Okay? So now it looks similar. That may or may not have meant anything to you. That was just one thing that was in that article. I thought it was kind of cool, so I went with it. All right, well, that takes us almost to the end of our time, and so I just kind of wanted to get you a feel to get started here. I want to tell you, I'm going to jump over here. Let me go ahead and let's get out of there. Come back over to here. Move some stuff around on my computer here so that we can see things. All right, so what I want to do here is go through just a little bit of Q&A. I want to tell you, before any of you disappear, I want to remind you that, again, may not be able to answer them here today. I'm going to do my best. I will try to follow up with you via email, because I should have who asked the question and what your email address is from your registration. But I also want to mention that I'm doing another webinar in 3 weeks. It's actually 3 weeks from today on June 28th. Because next week, I'm going to Microsoft's Tech Ed conference, which is the biggest conference of the year for Microsoft. Everything at Tech Ed this year is all about Windows 8 and Windows Server 2012. I'm going to have an opportunity to talk to a lot of Microsoft program managers. I'm actually going to be there, and if any of you are going to be there, please come by and find me. I'm actually going to be there representing Microsoft. They invited me to join them in their booth. For some of the time that we're there, so look and see if you can find me. I think I'm mostly there on Wednesday and Thursday. But the point is if I can ask a lot of these questions, and I will try to not only send an email to the individuals, but I'll see if I can incorporate some of these questions into that presentation that I want to give 3 weeks from now, where I bring back all the cool stuff that I find at Tech Ed. That said, let me see if I can grab a few questions here. I see there's some technical ones. Is Active Directory, is there a new level? Yes, we already answered that. There is a new level. Let's see here. Oh, all right. Sorry, there's just a number of people who are talking about where they're from and that I should say, hey, Italy is the best. So there you go. I said Italy. Someone told me to say that. Can we deactivate Metro with 2012? You know, not as far as I know. There is no way, and trust me, I've been looking. It doesn't mean that there is no way. It just means I haven't found it yet. To do kind of like a classic mode kind of thing. Microsoft is making it very clear that they are all in when it comes to cloud computing, and I have a feeling they're all in when it comes to Metro. So for the moment, no. Now, if enough people complain to Microsoft and say, this Metro thing is the pits, well, then yeah, I think they might do it. So let's go ahead and move along here. A similar question. Do I know if Microsoft's going to put back the start button? It's my understanding, and believe it or not, I've been focused so much on the server side, I haven't looked at the Windows 8 client side. I think the Windows 8 client side does have a button. And if that's true, it would lead me to think that the server side, they may decide to put it back. They might be feeling it out to see what the response is. There's a question here that's a little bit more advanced about one of the new file systems or changes in SMB. No, obviously we're at the end of this, so Sunil, sorry I did not talk about that, but I'm going to make a note of that is something of interest that maybe we'll talk about in future presentations. Somebody commented that they like very much that you can install the GUI or uninstall it afterwards, and you know what? You and me both. I think that is a phenomenal decision to make it that you can do a full-blown, GUI-based installation, because let's be real, the core-based installation is not easy to work with. So why not let me have the GUI to set things up, and then after we're all done setting it up, if I want this to be a stripped-down, locked-down core version, let it happen. So I think that I agree with you. That is a great, great, great feature. I know somebody already. I already know that the my assistant here already answered it, but somebody said, "Wait, you didn't read the license agreement." That's kind of a. And when I was in the classroom, I'll tell you what, we made that joke all the time. And by the way, Alexandru, and I hope I'm pronouncing that right. You don't have to apologize for making a statement instead of a question. As you saw, I actually did read it and share it with everybody. That's who brought up the point about liking the being able to go GUI and go back again. Does Windows Server 2012 support touchscreen monitors with its Metro UI? Matt, you know what? I believe that it is part of the idea. Now, I don't know the answer as to exactly what is going to be supported, like to what capacity, if what tablet-based environments will be supported. You know, on top of, forget tablets, just even touchscreen computers. But I do believe that, yes, that is the idea. That's part of why we have these big buttons and stuff like that. I'd like to know if all Windows 2012 Server is on top of PowerShell. Yes, it is all based off of PowerShell. I'm glad, Mike, you let me know you can see the mouse. That actually, I wish I would have seen that while I was doing it, because that does come in very handy to know that you guys can see what I'm doing. Again, Craig, am I going to show you any of the PowerShell? Again, Craig, I can answer that. Craig asked if I'm going to show any of the PowerShell-based stuff. The only thing I had time for here was just to get into that one script, just to show you that it's there. I am certain that whether it's me or somebody else, we will have sessions on PowerShell. Any news on RSAT for Server 2012? Will it be possible to run Server Manager? I don't have the specifics, but my understanding, again, some of this stuff, because it's so new, it's like sometimes I wonder if I actually read it or if I imagined I did, and I have to go double check myself. Yes, I do believe that you will be able to. You already can do it from Windows Server. You definitely can do it from Windows 8. I believe you can even do it from Windows 7. As far as recommended system requirements, you know what? I thought about posting that, although I don't have those specs. Microsoft hasn't officially. You know, again, we're not RTM yet, so those specs might change. What I am being told right now is that if the specs were good enough for Windows Server 2008, they should be good enough for Windows Server 2012, and that's pretty awesome. That said, we'll see if that actually holds true. That you heard that the DC promo process has changed. What's different? Well, we just went through it. So as you can see, there were subtle differences, nothing drastic. Matt has pointed out that you don't agree with the 16:9 and that you don't see widescreen monitors for a rack where most servers are. Well, so here's the deal. I agree with you. You typically don't see 16:9 widescreen for your server solutions, like on a rack. But, again, the main idea here is that you're not supposed to be working from the rack anymore. You're supposed to be working from your desk. I'm not saying that that's the right answer. I'm just telling you, I'm kind of preaching what Microsoft is passing along. Let me take a look. How are we doing on time? Because I do see we're about 5 minutes after. Let me look for just a couple more questions, and the rest of them I will email you an answer if there is a question that needs to be answered. Instant roles on multiple servers at once. You know what, Mike? The idea, there was a question about installing instant roles on multiple servers at once. And I'm pretty, although I haven't practiced this myself, okay? That's one thing about me you'll learn. I'm very honest. Even if it's like, oh, gosh, like I should have done it by now. Yeah, maybe I should have, but that's one of the things I haven't gotten to yet. But I believe the answer is you are supposed to be able to do that. And I see a bunch of other questions that came in about recordings and getting this later, and the answer is always yes. Say you're installing a role in the remote server. Does that server have to have the install media for that role, or will it pull from the server you're working on? I do believe that it will pull, meaning if you're just installing a role, there's no media that actually has to be installed. It was all installed originally and where it needs to be. So I think we're fine there. Again, I haven't actually done a ton of the remote stuff yet. Even where I did it, where I simulated remote, it was still just simulated, not true remote. So anyway, at this time, what I want to do, and I do know there are some more questions here, as there typically are, and I'll tell you, when it comes to something like Windows Server 2012, I expected piles and piles of questions. Everybody has a ton of questions. I have a ton of questions. So I'm going to do my best to either answer you via email and or please, I welcome you to look up my my webinar that I'm doing in 3 weeks, and I'm going to use these questions to help format some of the subject matter for that webinar. But what I want to do is just real quick, if you want to connect with us or with me, you can find me online either at Facebook. I have a Train Signal Ed Facebook page. On Twitter, you can also follow me at TrainSignal_Ed. I will tell you I'm not on Twitter very often. I am on Facebook all the time, every day. If you want to jump in and follow Train Signal or even Microsoft Learning, where you can find out stuff about Server 2012, we have the Train Signal blog, Facebook page, and Twitter for Train Signal, and then we also have Born to Learn with Microsoft Learning, or even when it comes to certification, the Microsoft.com/learning page. With that, what I would like to do is I'm going to hand this back to Sean, who is going to go ahead and wrap things up. I thank you all for the time. I hope you grabbed at least a little something out of this, and I look forward to seeing you in future webinars, or like I said, come find me at Tech Ed if you're going to be there out in Orlando next week.